Good morning, everybody. It is a great pleasure to see so many of you here, and I'm always reluctant to stop conversations, but we will have another opportunity in a little while. But I really want to follow on from our excellent start and introduce our colleague from Coursera, Nicolas Foucault. Hope I've pronounced that somewhat appropriately, who is the Managing Director of Europe, Middle East and Africa for our friends at Coursera, who's going to be challenged, I think, possibly to some extent by what we heard, but we'll look at the progress and promise of generative AI. Nicolas, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for the host, and thank you very much for the presenters. That was a really interesting introduction and presentation, and like I think Simon alluded to, I believe this will be perhaps the opposing side of the argument. I am not approaching it from the academic perspective, and I am not a researcher. Thank you. Should I advance the slides here?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think I have to press the button, these buttons.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm, like Simon said, the Managing Director for Coursera in EMEA. I am thrilled to be spending time here and having a conversation, and particularly with the conversation that preceded this one, I'm hoping that we can have what universities are all about, I believe, which is a healthy debate and conversation around the topic of AI and its potential impact on education and learners. Many of you may know Coursera, you may not know Coursera. I suspect many of you know about the 17 development goals from the United Nations. Coursera was essentially founded by two Stanford professors in computer science 12 years ago. And the way that we think about our mission and our goal is essentially when you look at the 17 goals from the UN, we believe that one of them drives many of the others. We believe that education, and particularly high quality education, being able to offer high quality education broadly and make it accessible to millions of people, hundreds of millions of people across the world, is a key part of enabling other development goals from the UN, particularly, and some of those were mentioned earlier today, gender equality. If you think about poverty, if you think about improving opportunity partnerships, we believe that education sits very much at the core of that. That's the premise upon which Coursera was founded 12 years ago. The topic of the conference is research. I understand, by the way, that the University of London has had experience in distance learning since 1858. So that's very humbling. We have 12 years of experience in online learning, not distance learning. So that will form the basis of much of the data and the research that I'm going to present today. This research here was from Bloomberg in 2017. You'll see many research data and points that go back to 2016, 2017, and then some from 2023. And much of the conversation will be about drawing the parallel and then the differences, and then the impact of AI on the world of work and the world of teaching and the world of learning, and how that impact, we believe, is profound and radically changes the landscape. So from 2017, this is based on Oxford University and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can see the jobs that were at the highest risk of automation only 7 years ago. And there's a direct correlation. In blue, you have the college degree. In red, you have the no formal education, the wages in the y-axis, and then risk of automation on the x-axis. And there's a very strong correlation 7 years ago. If you're in a low-paid job and you don't have a lot of education, your job is most at risk from a 2017 perspective. So if you're operating a till, if you are a waiter, then your job is very much at risk. If on the flip side of it, you're an IT manager, a financial manager, your job is less at risk. As we know, this provided a reason for higher education and online education to perform and offer opportunities, life opportunities to a lot of people. And essentially the premise, the paradigm at this point was through knowledge and digital skills and credentials, you gain access to opportunity. That was the world as we knew it 7 years ago. We believe with generative AI, there is a shift, and all of the less exposed roles now become more exposed. Specifically, and this is where we get into more recent research from the last year. This is research from the University of Pennsylvania. Up to 49% of workers could have half of more of their tasks exposed to LLMs, large language models. Higher wages are now exposed to the impact of AI in the same way that workers, factory floor workers, were exposed to the impact of robotic manufacturing 4.0 or robots just 7-10 years ago. Now, if you think about the specific role of education in that context, I believe it fundamentally changes how we think about the value that education provides, both at the early in career, as well as lifelong education for workers. If you think about it, again, comparing 2016 to 2023, you have the OECD data on the left-hand side of the chart, and then on the right-hand side of the chart, you have another extract from the same Pennsylvania survey in 2023. What we see is a direct change in terms of exposure to technological disruption. So if you think about the value that education provides in terms of life opportunities, socioeconomic advancement, that has to question very fundamentally at a very deep level, what is the value that we collectively now offer to learners? By 2027, this is now from the World Economic Forum, the Future of Jobs report. There's an annual version. This one, again, is from 2023. According to the World Economic Forum, by 2027, in a very, very short amount of time, 61% of workers will require retraining, and yet only 50% of workers have access to training. Was there a question, comment?
Just with some automation happen.
Yeah. So this mapping of skills, this is very important to us. This is data from Coursera, this one. So we use both primary research as well as third-party research to look at how people think about their skills and the skills that they choose to prioritize in learning. And so you have digital skills on the right-hand side of the slide. You have human self-leadership and cognitive skills in the middle of the slide. And what we do is we map out based on the data that we have on the platform, and I'll give you some numbers in terms of the usage of the platform and the number of hours. But what we do is we map out the perceived benefits from learners to the skills that they chose to invest in. And so what we noticed is actually, and this is again a radical change from just 6 or 7 years ago. 6 or 7 years ago, the focus was on technical skills, hard skills. What we find is that both from an employer perspective now, as well as learners going onto the Coursera platform, an investment in self-leadership, interpersonal, cognitive skills tends to lead to higher benefits in terms of both career potential, career opportunity, wages, and also satisfaction. There's a particular skill here that comes up, and I think everybody will get access to the slide, so you can get a lot more detail on the sources and the data. But there's a skill that has come up a lot in terms of the investment and the return on that investment from learners, which is the coping with uncertainty skill, which I find interesting in the context of our discussion today. So again, we looked at it from a variety of outcomes: job satisfaction, predictors of employment, wages, and self-satisfaction as well. So that's the landscape in terms of we see the world of learning and the world of work being fundamentally changed in the last 7 years. I don't know about the last 18. The last 18 have certainly seen an acceleration, but there's a fundamental change in mapping skills to career opportunity, progression. We now see people on the Coursera platform learning what we refer to as micro-credentials. I'll come back to it in a few minutes. And they see those micro-credentials as an opportunity to advance their career and gain access to jobs, perhaps sometimes catching up with an earlier in life learning opportunity that they didn't have. So we believe this is fundamental to our mission. Now, this is the landscape. This is the world as we see it. Let's talk a little bit about online learning, where we are after 12 years of experience. And then we'll get into some examples of AI and not just how it impacts learners and the job market, but how it impacts the way that we do teaching and learning on the platform today. So for context, just in terms of the data set and what we look at, Coursera today has 142, as of the last count, million registered learners on the platform. From a content perspective, on the left-hand side of the slide, we work with what we call education partners, 325 of them. There's about 190 on the university side, this university being an example of a content partner from an educator perspective. And then we have the industry partners that are your, in the technology space, your Microsoft and Google and IBM and so forth. The 7,000 institutions on the right-hand side are those that are using Coursera to provide access to their learners. And they could be campuses, they could be universities, they could be businesses, they can be governments. This is how we think about the content and packaging the content and bringing the content together on the platform, particularly from the education partners that I referred to earlier on. So as I'm sure everybody in the room will be aware, there's more and more demand for short form content. We are not yet, as Coursera, in the business of providing 5 or 10-second video. We don't think of it as learning. We could have a conversation around it, I'm sure, today. But the shortest that we do is typically 5 or 10 minutes. We don't call it learning. We call it take a look on the right-hand side. And those are clips that typically provide a level of interest, awareness in a topic. And then as you go down, we have fewer and fewer pieces of content, but they're more and more meaningful in terms of time investment and also in terms of learning outcome and life outcome, if that makes sense. So you go from clips that are 5 to 10 minutes long to projects. Projects can be integrated into courses. Courses become specializations. Specializations lead into certificates. Certificates can go into degrees. We have currently 50 degrees plus a little more on the platform today. And we have 6,000 courses. Now, a key challenge, and I'll come back to it in a few minutes, a key challenge actually both for learners as well as for partners, both on the corporate side as well as institutions and campuses, is making sense of all of this content and structuring the content in a way that is agile and adapts to the learning needs of students and the learning needs of, I may already know something about data science, but not another piece of the course. And so how do you make the curriculum tailored and customized to my individual needs as a learner is a very large challenge that we face given this amount of content. Now, one other thing that I'll mention about the content, particularly in the context of this conversation around generative AI, is because our philosophy has been to have highly curated, trusted, vetted content. We only work with trusted university partners, trusted industry partners. If and as we apply AI tools on it, like we'll discuss in a minute, that allows us to have integrity of knowing the database, knowing the foundational systems and data that the AI is applied on. So I mentioned earlier, we see rising demand for micro-credentials. Micro-credentials, I assume many in the audience will be intimately familiar. So what we see is students, learners, workers at any point in their career are now looking more and more for specific credentials that are going to give them access to particular career paths that were not open to them in the past. This is the highest growth category from all of the content on our platform. It's currently growing at 40% year on year from an enrollments and time spent on learning, the micro-credentials specifically. Those are examples of those micro-credentials. Some of them, and again, I assume this would be of interest to the audience, maybe you know already. So we work with accredited bodies. Some of those micro-credentials will have ECTS accreditation, and universities across the world can then integrate those micro-credentials into a curriculum that becomes a certifying curriculum within the context of a hybrid learning environment. As of now, we have 1.8 million cumulative enrollments on the Coursera platform for professional certificates of the sorts on the slide, described on the slide. Now let's get to AI. This was all an introduction, right? So I think we talked a little bit about the world of learning, the world of work. I tried to give you a very brief perspective into what we learned as an online learning platform, given the activities on the platform. And now I want to talk a little bit more in details and give you some examples of how we see AI impacting our work today and some of the initiatives that we launched, yes, in the last 18 months and how we launched them as well. So we talked about this at a high level. AI is disrupting jobs. AI is also enabling learning, which I think is maybe the point of contention or the point of discussion on the right-hand side of the slide. In terms of AI disrupting jobs, that has had a direct impact on the way that we structure our curriculums, our programs, our courses, our credentials. And so we've created academies and courses specifically tailored at the percentage of the workforce that is going to see inevitably their job either augmented, threatened, replaced, displaced by AI. And so we have a generative AI academy, and we have generative AI courses for several roles and functions across industries. So there's a generative AI academy even for CEOs. There's one for leaders. There's a generative AI academy for everyone. So we structured particular content to be able to reach, because the demand for generative AI basic levels of awareness and knowledge and practice is so high. So we had to quickly put together curriculums that would respond to those demands. In terms of enabling the learning, I have 3 examples that I want to show you and discuss with you today. Given one of the questions earlier, I think one of those examples is going to be of particular interest, maybe, which is around the translation. I also want to talk about how we can coach learners on the platform. And then I want to talk about how we can curate and create specific curricula in a faster way using AI. So on the why question that was asked earlier on, when I reflected on why would we do that, I think from a Coursera perspective, and I'm sure everybody in the room has picked up, I may be the first non-native English speaker today. I do speak English, but I was very fortunate to have been given an opportunity to learn. Had I not been given that opportunity to learn, would I be able to converse with this audience today? I don't know. Does that limit my potential in life? When we think about our mission at Coursera, language is a huge part of accessibility. If all of our content was available in one language only, doesn't matter if it's English. French is great for me, but it may not be great for you. If all of our content was available in one language only, we limit the impact of our content drastically from the get-go. And so whatever we can do with AI to accelerate machine learning translation, that amplifies the impact we can have on learners globally. So I want to show you a quick video that illustrates where we want to take this in the future.
Sorry, bear with us.
That's all right. So while you bring it up, just so I introduce our next speaker on the video. This is Jeff. Jeff is the CEO of Coursera globally. Jeff, on the video now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We can do it without sound. I think this was, like I said, this is one of the questions that came up earlier. The risk and threat of deep fakes was a question that was raised. I want to talk about the opportunity side of it. So this is Jeff talking in English, his native language. And what you see further in the video is he translates or he switches into many different languages, including French. I have to say, when Jeff speaks French to me, I find the experience incredible, but that is not just translation of, that is not subscript, that is not translation of text or courses or assessment. It does utilize the full scope of what AI enables us to do with video today, which is facial movement, the mouth and the entire face and the emotions follow the language. And it allows me to have a very different level of connection with Jeff as an instructor when Jeff provides a video on the Coursera platform. So that's again, I think the sound would have been helpful to get that experience, but you get the essence of it. Can we move back to the slides? So I'm so delighted that this slide was here before we started the day, because yes, we see the opportunity for AI, and we're very committed, and we don't think it would be acceptable to not continue on our mission to provide learning and make it accessible to hundreds of millions more people across the world. So we'll continue on with integrating AI to deliver on that mission. And at the same time, that has to be based on very strong AI principles. So those are the AI principles we use as an example as we deliver synthetic video technology, which was what the previous slide was demonstrating. I will skip through, Simon, the other two examples, just to illustrate at a high level, and then we'll see if it stirs conversation. The other two examples were around building courses, so building curriculum, including what we refer to as private authoring. So imagine there's a wonderful course from the University of London, and you want to add to that course specific IP from you as a teacher, from your university, and you want to blend those courses and make them available to your students. We also have a strong set of AI principles to design exactly what you can do. But Course Builder allows you to search within the catalog, collect and compile curriculums from the catalog. And then Coach was the last example where you can imagine as a learner what the experience is when you go through a particular module. And then there's a piece of the module specifically that you haven't understood. Traditionally, you would work with peers, you would work with teachers in an asynchronous manner. With Coach, you're able to do that synchronously directly on the platform. Yes, in a conversational fashion. Let me pause here. Do we want to get into conversation at this point?
I think we're going to have the back.
All right.
So as I understand it, the Course Builder takes content from courses that are on your platform that have been created, well, 66 of them have been created by my colleagues at the University of London and the partners with which we work. And now students can pull together and aggregate a variety of pieces of content from different institutions. And from a learner perspective, I see that as very exciting. But from an institutional perspective, I see that as quite challenging because it's taking IP from a variety of places. And I guess it goes back to the comments that the first panel were making about AI not respecting authorship, as it were, and the authenticity. So I don't know if you have any comments.
Yeah, I think a couple. So firstly, Course Builder is designed for teachers, not students. And so Course Builder is a tool to use for designing courses. And so what we saw is a demand both in the corporate world to aggregate and build up courses from the library. From an IP perspective, obviously every content that's on the platform is governed by an IP agreement. This is the case for the University of London and Coursera, and that IP agreement is respected as we deliver the content to teachers. Yeah.
I think we'll perhaps draw into a close there. Mindful that we now have the opportunity to socialise this opportunity and bring together further conversations. So I'm encouraged to do that over a cup of coffee across the corridor. We'll be back on 11:35 for second starting